Good morning/afternoon/evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we gather under the theme of Lori Gottlieb's powerful reminder that stories shape how we see the world, and the story I am about to share is nothing short of historic. When Dr. S. Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister, broke his silence with a message that stunned the United States, it was not just diplomacy, it was a turning point. His words carried the weight of India's growing voice in global affairs, and they echoed across continents. In this speech, I will take you through the message, why it shocked America, and what it means for the future of international relations. India's diplomatic confidence has been steadily evolving over the past decade, and when Dr. S. Jaishankar chose to break his silence with a message that surprised the United States, it reflected this transformation in a very clear way. For years, India was often seen as cautious in its foreign policy approach, preferring to maintain balance rather than take strong public positions. However, the tone and weight of Jaishankar's words showed that India is no longer content with simply being a quiet observer on the world stage. Instead, it has begun to embrace its role as a confident power that can speak with authority on global matters. This shift is not accidental. It is the result of India's growing economic strength, military modernization, and strategic partnerships with countries around the world. The ability to stand up and deliver a message that captures international attention shows that India is moving beyond hesitation and stepping into a space where its voice is taken seriously. The confidence that India demonstrates today is grounded in both experience and necessity. In a world where geopolitics is dominated by competition between the United States and China, India has emerged as a key player whose choices matter significantly. No longer can global powers dictate terms without considering India's position. Jaishankar's message reflected this reality, signaling that India has the confidence to assert its national interests without fear of backlash from any nation, including the U.S. This is a remarkable change compared to the past, when India often avoided confrontation in order to preserve relationships with stronger powers. Now, confidence has replaced caution, and assertiveness has replaced hesitation. What makes this confidence particularly powerful is that it is rooted in self-reliance and resilience. India has faced economic challenges, security threats, and diplomatic pressure, yet it has consistently managed to strengthen its global standing. Jaishankar's speech is symbolic of this resilience because it sends the message that India does not need validation from other nations to express its views. Instead, it is willing to take bold stances that reflect its independent foreign policy. This independence is not arrogance. It is the natural outcome of a nation that believes in its own capabilities and understands its global responsibilities. Furthermore, diplomatic confidence is not only about words, but also about timing and context. Breaking the silence at the right moment is itself a sign of strategic wisdom. By waiting until the right opportunity and then delivering a message that stunned the U.S., Jaishankar showed that India's voice will not be drowned out by larger powers. On the contrary, it has the ability to surprise, challenge, and influence the narrative. This confidence is a result of decades of growth and learning, but it is also a signal of the future. India is not just participating in global conversations, it is shaping them. That is why this message marked more than a diplomatic statement. It marked the rise of India's confident new identity in international affairs. When Dr. S. Jaishankar delivered his message that stunned the United States, one of the most striking aspects was the reaction it generated in Washington and beyond. For decades, America has been accustomed to dealing with countries that often soften their positions when addressing sensitive issues with the U.S. India, however, chose a different path. Instead of offering the usual diplomatic comfort or indirect words, Jaishankar's statement carried clarity, firmness, and precision. This caught the United States by surprise because it revealed an India that was unwilling to compromise on its principles simply to maintain the image of harmony. The unexpected reaction of America was not just about the words themselves, but about the tone of self-assurance that accompanied them. It was a reminder that the global order is shifting and that the U.S. is no longer speaking to a junior partner, but to an equal who is confident in its place on the world stage. The reaction of the United States reflected a deeper reality. America is not used to being confronted with such directness from partners it once considered dependent. India, in the past, might have been careful to avoid any position that could be seen as too confrontational. But Jaishankar's boldness showed that those days are gone. The stunned response was not because America disagreed entirely, but because it did not expect such unapologetic firmness. This moment forced policymakers, analysts, and media in the U.S. to reconsider how they view India. No longer can they assume that India will remain silent or neutral when its interests are at stake. Instead, they must recognize India as a country capable of making strong statements and standing by them, regardless of outside pressure. This reaction also reveals something about the changing nature of diplomacy. In today's interconnected world, powerful messages travel faster than ever, and the U.S. could not ignore the wave created by Jaishankar's words. Within hours, his remarks were being analyzed across global platforms, discussed in think tanks, and debated on television. The shock value lay not only in what he said, but in how those words exposed America's discomfort with an India that refuses to play by old rules. The U.S. reaction demonstrated a mix of respect and unease. Respect because it recognized India's growing strength, and unease because it realized the old ways of managing relations with India may no longer work. Perhaps the most significant part of this reaction was that it served as a wake-up call. The United States was reminded that its influence, though still vast, is no longer absolute. It cannot expect compliance without challenge, nor can it ignore the perspectives of rising powers. For India, this was a moment of empowerment. For the U.S., it was a lesson in adjusting to new realities. The stunned reaction, therefore, was not a sign of weakness on America's part, but a sign that Jaishankar's message struck the core of international politics. It forced everyone watching to accept that India's voice can no longer be dismissed or underestimated. The idea of a shifting balance of global power has been at the center of international politics for the last 2 decades, but Jaishankar's message that stunned the United States highlighted just how visible this shift has become. For a long time, the world operated under a unipolar structure where the United States was seen as the single dominant superpower. Decisions made in Washington often shaped global policies, and other nations adjusted themselves accordingly. However, as Jaishankar's statement made clear, this unipolar moment has ended. Today, the world is entering a multipolar phase where countries like India, China, Russia, and others are shaping new centers of influence. India's willingness to openly assert itself and challenge expectations signaled that it is no longer just a participant in global affairs, but a decisive player capable of influencing outcomes. The shift is not only about economics or military strength, but also about narrative and confidence. India's growth over the past decade has made it one of the largest economies in the world, and its position as a technological and democratic power makes it unique among rising nations. When Jaishankar broke his silence, his words were more than a diplomatic remark. They symbolized a rebalancing of power where India demanded recognition not as a follower, but as a leader. The shock in the United States came from realizing that the balance it once controlled is now being openly contested. This is not confrontation for the sake of confrontation, but rather an expression of India's belief that the global order must reflect the realities of the present, not the past. The message also underscored the decline of Western dominance in dictating global norms. While the United States and its allies still hold enormous influence, they can no longer expect unquestioned authority. Countries like India now play the role of independent voices that resist pressure and assert their own agendas. This balancing act is part of a wider global shift where alliances are becoming more flexible and power is more evenly distributed. In this sense, Jaishankar's statement was not just about India and the U.S., it was about telling the world that new centers of gravity are here and they demand acknowledgement. The stunned reaction in America was an admission that even the most powerful must adjust to this new reality. What makes this shift even more significant is the way it redefines partnerships. Instead of relationships built on dependency, the world is seeing more partnerships of equals. India's growing role in organizations like BRICS, the G20, and the Quad highlights its ability to work with multiple powers simultaneously, often without fully aligning with any single bloc. This flexibility is a mark of confidence and a clear signal of the multipolar system that is taking shape. Jaishankar's boldness amplified this message. India will not be tied down by one narrative, nor will it be pressured into choosing sides. Ultimately, the balance of power is not just shifting, it is being reimagined. The message that stunned the United States was a symbol of that reimagination. It was a declaration that India is ready to shape the rules of tomorrow's world, and those who once dominated must learn to share space. The balance has moved, and with leaders like Jaishankar speaking with such clarity, the world cannot ignore that reality anymore. When Dr. S. Jaishankar chose to deliver a message that stunned the United States, at the heart of his words was a strong emphasis on sovereignty and respect. For India, sovereignty is not just a political term, it is a core principle that has defined its journey since independence. Every nation wants to be treated with dignity, but in global politics, this respect is not always automatic. Smaller nations are often pressured to align with the interests of bigger powers, and their choices are questioned if they do not fall in line. India has long been on the receiving end of such pressures, especially when its policies diverged from those of the United States or other Western countries. However, Jaishankar's statement was a clear reminder that India will no longer allow its decisions to be second-guessed or dictated by external forces. Sovereignty means that India alone will decide what is best for its people, its economy, and its security, and respect means that the world must accept this without interference. This stand is not new, but the way it was expressed carried a different weight. In the past, India often communicated its independence in subtle, cautious tones. Now, however, the message is clear and firm. The stunned reaction from the U.S. was partly because Jaishankar spoke with such directness that it left no room for misinterpretation. He made it evident that respect in international relations cannot be one-sided. If the United States expects India to respect its interests and positions, then it must also extend the same courtesy in return. This demand for equality is not about hostility, it is about fairness. A partnership cannot survive if one side constantly questions or undermines the other's choices. By stressing sovereignty and respect, Jaishankar put forth the idea that mutual recognition is the only way forward in modern diplomacy. The emphasis on sovereignty also connects with India's broader philosophy of strategic autonomy. India has consistently avoided binding alliances that restrict its freedom to act in its national interest. This is why it has managed to maintain close relations with countries as different as Russia, the United States, and members of the Global South. Jaishankar's words reinforced this tradition. They signaled that India will not compromise its independence to please any one power, no matter how influential. This stance resonates strongly with other nations that also feel pressured in the current global order. In many ways, Jaishankar was not just speaking for India, but for every country that values the right to make its own choices without fear of judgment or punishment. Respect, in this context, becomes as important as sovereignty itself. India is not seeking special treatment. It is demanding what every nation deserves. The message to the U.S. was that dialogue and cooperation must be built on acknowledgement, not condescension. For decades, Western powers often assumed that their perspectives carried more legitimacy, while others were expected to follow. That mindset no longer works in today's multipolar world. By insisting on respect, Jaishankar challenged not only the U.S., but also the old frameworks of global diplomacy. This position is significant because it sets the tone for India's future role in world affairs. It signals that India's partnerships will be based on balance, not dependence. It ensures that India's voice will be heard as one of equal weight, not as a secondary opinion, and it establishes that true cooperation requires recognition of sovereignty and respect as non-negotiable values. The message may have stunned the United States, but it also served as a powerful reminder to the entire world. Nations that value their dignity will no longer settle for anything less than equal respect. International partnerships have always been a cornerstone of diplomacy, but the way India approaches them today is very different from the past. Dr. S. Jaishankar's message that stunned the United States underlined this transformation. For many years, global partnerships were often shaped by dependency, where one country provided economic or military support, and the other aligned its policies accordingly. This model worked for the powers that led these partnerships, but it left the smaller nations with limited space for independence. India, however, is now reshaping this narrative. Rather than entering into relationships of dependence, it is redefining partnerships as collaborations of equals. Jaishankar's words showed that India is not willing to be a follower. It expects to be recognized as a partner with its own voice, values, and interests. This redefinition is rooted in India's long-standing policy of strategic autonomy. India has always been cautious about being tied too closely to one camp, whether during the Cold War or in the current era of U.S.-China rivalry. Instead of being pressured into choosing sides, India prefers to engage with multiple partners simultaneously. Today, it is part of the Quad with the U.S., Japan, and Australia, while also being an active member of BRICS alongside Russia and China. It works closely with the European Union while maintaining defense ties with Moscow. This balancing act reflects not confusion but confidence. India is making it clear that partnerships should not require surrendering independence. Instead, they should reflect mutual benefit and respect. Jaishankar's message echoed this idea powerfully, which is why it struck such a chord globally. By redefining partnerships in this way, India is also setting a model for other developing nations. Many countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America have long struggled with unequal partnerships where stronger powers dictated terms. When India insists on equality in its relationships, it is also giving voice to these nations. It shows that a rising power can cooperate with the world without losing its identity or compromising its sovereignty. This perspective makes India's diplomatic approach more inclusive and appealing to countries that feel overshadowed in global politics. It also explains why many nations welcome India's leadership role in forums like the G20, where the focus is often on the concerns of the global South. The redefinition of partnerships also carries a message for traditional powers like the United States. If they wish to strengthen ties with India, they must understand that the relationship cannot be one of patron and beneficiary. India will not accept lectures, pressures, or conditional support. Instead, it seeks genuine cooperation where both sides benefit equally. This shift may surprise some in Washington, but it is also an opportunity. By adapting to this new reality, the U.S. can build a stronger, more sustainable partnership with India, one that is based on respect rather than dominance. In essence, Jaishankar's message symbolized this new model of global partnerships. It was not simply a diplomatic statement. It was a vision for how international relations should evolve in a multipolar world. No longer should countries enter into partnerships out of fear or dependence. Instead, they should collaborate because they see value in each other's strengths and perspectives. This idea, though it startled some, is the foundation for a more balanced and fair global order. And in redefining what partnerships mean, India is not just securing its own future, but also helping to shape the way nations will engage with one another in the decades to come. When Dr. S. Jaishankar delivered his statement that stunned the United States, it carried not only immediate significance, but also a powerful message for the future of global diplomacy. The essence of this message is that the old frameworks of international relations can no longer sustain the world we live in. For decades, diplomacy was shaped by a few powerful nations that dictated the pace, tone, and rules of engagement. Smaller countries were often seen as players on the sidelines rather than partners in shaping the system. But Jaishankar's words revealed that the time has come for a more inclusive, multipolar, and balanced approach to global diplomacy. This is not simply about India versus the U.S. It is about changing how nations interact, cooperate, and resolve differences in the 21st century. The future of diplomacy, as hinted by Jaishankar, rests on mutual respect, equality, and recognition of diverse interests. No country, no matter how powerful, can assume that its perspective will automatically dominate global discussions. The stunned reaction in America was proof that this shift has already begun. India's message reflects the reality that nations are now more self-assured, more capable of defending their choices, and more unwilling to submit to external pressures. This means diplomacy will increasingly revolve around negotiation and consensus rather than dominance and compliance. In this future, even superpowers will need to adapt to a world where cooperation is possible only through genuine acknowledgement of others' sovereignty. Another key part of the message for the future of diplomacy is the role of multipolarity. The world is no longer defined by one or two great powers. Instead, influence is distributed across many regions and players, each with its own strengths. From Asia to Africa to Latin America, nations are asserting themselves, and global diplomacy must reflect this. India's boldness in addressing the U.S. is symbolic of this new age. It demonstrates that the center of gravity in world politics is shifting, and the next phase of diplomacy will require inclusivity. For the U.S. and other traditional powers, this is both a challenge and an opportunity. They can either cling to outdated hierarchies or embrace the new, shared approach to international engagement. The message also emphasizes accountability. Global diplomacy in the future cannot simply serve the interests of the most powerful. It must deliver solutions for global challenges like climate change, economic inequality, and security threats. Jaishankar's words hinted that India is ready to take responsibility as a leader in this emerging order, and that other nations should be ready to share that responsibility as well. Diplomacy will no longer be about power projection alone. It will be about problem solving on behalf of the global community. Ultimately, the message for the future of global diplomacy is one of transformation. It signals that a fairer and more balanced system is possible, but only if nations recognize the need to evolve beyond old patterns. Jaishankar's statement may have stunned the United States in the moment, but in the long run, it serves as a reminder to all nations that the future belongs to those who can adapt, respect others, and work together as equals. This vision of diplomacy, bold and forward-looking, is what will define the next chapter of international relations.